Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, and this is a show that's trying to make the world safe for ADHD. I am a clinical psychologist, neuropsychologist in private practice. A large part of my practice is ADHD evaluations and treatment. I do children, adults, relationships, the whole, pretty much everything. And I'm also the parent of an ADHD child. As such, I have, as I pretty much say every time I start this show, I've made just about every mistake you can make as the parent of an ADHD child. And like most of us, I made all those mistakes out of pure ignorance, not understanding what I was dealing with and what was going on, and that there probably was a better way to do it than what I had worked out. I was like most people of my generation. I was raised with a spare the rod and spoil the child kind of mentality. Wasn't quite that extreme, but it was definitely because I said so. That's why. School of authoritarian kind of parenting. And needless to say, that didn't work very well with my ADHD child, and it won't work very well with yours either. It just doesn't work. That the thing we've got to emphasize and I'm not saying that being the parent of an ADHD child is an easy job. I think sometimes folks who are a little further down the road sometimes make it seem like it was so easy once they figured it out, and I refuse to believe that it was ever very easy. I know in my case it was never very easy. Come to think of it, it's not always easy now. My ADHD child is a grown-up, but still has all the ADHD kinds of ways of thinking and behaving and doing and all that sort of thing. But one of the things I try to remind myself of, and I try to remind all my parents who have ADHD children of, is that you've got to understand what you're dealing with, and you've got to have long-term goals for your child. If you are one of these folks that is stuck in the obedience compliance mode of parenting, you are in for a war. Your child is going to cause problems for you in ways that you have probably not foreseen. And it's going to be a battle every day. So ADHDers don't do compliance very well. Okay, that doesn't mean that you back off and let them do whatever they want to, but it does mean that you recognize that sometimes they really can't do what you're asking them to do. And I think one of the things that is probably a big problem with ADHD is that it doesn't look any different from anything else. Okay, you look like just a regular kid, but the thing we have to keep reminding ourselves of is that their brain is wired a little differently. They're not brain damaged. They just have a different way of thinking and a different set of cognitive skills than neurotypical kids. Okay, and one of the big problems they have is their working memory is terrible. Okay, working memory. It's the kind of memory where you don't really plan on remembering it forever, but you're just keeping information in mind until you get the job done. Example would be, mom tells child to go up to his or her room and do 3 things. That's a test of working memory. By the time child gets to said bedroom, probably has forgotten most of what he or she was asked to do. That's not trying to be disobedient. That's just the way the brain works for these kiddos. And if you're a yeller, screamer, jump up and down kind of parent, you're going to have a lot of exercise, jumping up and down and yelling and screaming, because they're not doing it on purpose. And that's what you have to keep reminding yourself. Before you go off on your kid, on your ADHD child, you have to be thinking, no, wait a minute. Does he or she really have control in this situation? Can they do better? Well, and the answer is, of course, they can always do better, but you have to get out of the disciplinary model and get into the teacher, mentor, coach kind of model. Okay, they can learn a lot of these things, but it takes time. And force, fear, and punishment basically just slow things down. They make it harder to make the progress you want to make. So you have to keep remembering that you're looking at a long-term process of bringing this child to adulthood. And some of the goals you need to have are, first of all, preserving their self-worth. ADHD kids have a lot of troubles. They have troubles in school. They have troubles on the playground. They have troubles playing sports. You name it. They have some difficulties just because they do things that the other kids don't do, and they get into trouble more. And so it's real easy for them to start saying, I'm a loser. I can't do anything right. Get into that mood, that mindset, and they make more mistakes. They just do, and they have a harder time with some things. And probably the frustrating thing is that you can't really tell what they're going to have troubles with. If it's something they're really interested in, they'll do great with it, and learn it fast and da 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 da. If it's not something they don't really care that much about, they're going to have a horrible time with it, and that is especially school subjects. So you've got to be prepared, okay, and understand that they may not be just trying to defy you when they don't do what you ask. That's literally the best they can do. And your job is to try to get them to adulthood with a reasonable sense of self, that they're, not that they're God's gift by any means, but that they're a worthy human being. And you also want them to be responsible. You want a child who, if he forgets to do something, he tries to make it right later. Oh, crud, I forgot that. I'll go up now and do it, or that sort of thing. You've got to encourage that. And probably the biggest one is resilience. Basically, you don't want your child to be the kind of kid who quits when the going gets rough, or when he starts making mistakes. You want him or her to be able to say, okay, I made a mistake. What did I learn from that? What can I do different next time? That kind of thing. You want that kind of a problem-solving mindset. You don't want them going, cool, what's the matter with me? Why do I always, and for Lord's sake, don't you be assisting him in getting that, or her in getting that low self-esteem. No, you have to say, look, okay, you made a mistake. That's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Now, what did you learn from that mistake? And what can we do differently next time? That's a huge thing. It sounds like a little thing. But the only people who fail are the people who quit. The only people who quit after they make a mistake are those who don't have resilience, who don't have the idea that they're going to make mistakes and they just got to keep plugging along. If you teach that, that's the best lesson you can teach your kid. That's the only way they're going to succeed, because none of us, absolutely no one, succeeds without having, fallen down a few times or, bumped their knee or whatever expression you want to use. But we've all made mistakes, and if you're successful, you learn how to compensate for that, how to be the kind of person who learns when things don't go quite right, but doesn't give up on the goal. That's the huge thing with ADHD kiddos. They can't give up. They've got to keep going. They've got to keep trying. And then, the next thing is they do need to be taught to respect other people, that the other people have rights and that their behavior can sometimes affect other people. And so they should, they need to learn to watch out for that. And that's, it doesn't have to be angry, yelling, screaming. It's, hey, what do you think Mrs. Doodoo thought about this, Oh, did I say that? I did. Anyway, that Mrs. Smith thought about you when you yelled like that. But you're trying to teach that over and over and over again. There is no one trial learning with these kiddos. You have to keep doing it again and again and again. And then eventually they will get it. Okay? And probably the last thing and the most mechanical of the things is you have to teach them to compensate for the weaknesses that they have related to ADHD. Okay? Most of them have troubles with organization, with time management, and with time sense. Okay? And the time sense one is probably the trickiest one because most of us aren't really aware of that's a thing. Okay? Most of us have a kind of a built-in clock up here, and we can estimate, it took me 10 minutes to do that kind of thing. ADHD kids, not so much. They just do not have a good sense of passage of time, and they don't have a good sense of how long it takes to do stuff. They'll think that they can do a 10-page report in a half hour the night before the report is due. And they're not messing with you. They really honestly believe that. So you've got to teach them about the passage of time. And just real quickly, I'll go over this in more detail later on, but a timer is your best friend. A real obvious, bright-colored, funny-looking, whatever timer, so they understand the passage of time. That when they do homework, they do it, well, you've got to work it up. I'm not sure, where you're starting from, but say you're starting from a half hour seems like a long time. Set the timer for a half hour so they know what a half hour feels like. They learn that over time. And you have to keep doing that because they're not going to naturally experience the passage of time the way people who don't have ADHD do. And then time management is another tricky part to that. It's a secondary thing. How do you figure out how much you can get done in a given amount of time? And there's no way but experience that lets us know that, but you have to help them figure that out. And then organization. Organization is a major issue with ADHD kids. They tend to have difficulties starting things. They have difficulties completing things, projects in school, that sort of stuff. And they have difficulties figuring out what needs to be done when, kind of thing. That's all stuff you can train, okay? The deal is you have to understand that perhaps the way you learn to do organization is not the way that's going to apply best to them, okay? I'm a very left hemisphere, linear kind of organizer. I make my lists, I prioritize things on my list, and I follow my list. Not a problem for me. ADHDers sometimes don't do that or can't do that. And organization, for me, alphabetizing and putting stuff in folders in a file drawer, I've been doing that since high school. That's the way I learned to organize things. But some ADHDers, well, some of them are what I call horizontal organizers. Okay, and that's any flat surface is got papers and stuff on it in different stacks. And if you're lucky, the stacks mean something to the ADHDer. They know that that's where put such and such a piece of paper, and over here's where they put another one. And if that's the case, then all you have to do is work with the horizontal organization thing. If you happen to have married an ADHD person who is a horizontal organizer, you will recognize that because every flat surface in your house has got a stack of paper on it. If you're the kind of organizer I am, that this will cause you a little, you get a little stomach churn for them from that one. But if they can make it work, what are you going to do? It's not about perfection. It's about surviving and doing the best, fixing it up so everybody can do the best they can. Okay, so that's basically what we got. Is you want to encourage self-worth, you want to encourage responsibility, you want to encourage resilience, respect for others, and teach compensatory strategies. That's it. Nothing else. You have to understand that you are not going to get absolute obedience from your ADHD child. And that's not because they're belligerent or bad kids or trying to get away with something. It's the way their brains work. Okay? And you would find that your life will be easier for decades if you get on board with that way of thinking about your ADHD child. If you demand absolute obedience, good luck. I mean, it's going to be a rough slog. And I speak to you as a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, so I have my experience with absolute obedience and that sort of thing. Done work with an ADHD child. Okay. Once he enlists, all bets are off. But he's an adult by then, and hopefully has learned how to handle things better. When he's a kid or she's a kid, you have to adapt and adjust your parenting to compensate for the fact that they have some quirks in their cognitions, and you've got to learn to work around those. Okay, that's me for this week. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, and we're in the business of trying to make the world safe for ADHD, because ADHDers are outside-the-box thinkers, and outside-the-box thinkers are the ones who solve the big problems in the world. And maybe your child is the one who's going to do that. So we'll catch you next time. I can be reached at terrygingrassphd.com. And somewhere around here you can also write some things down. So if there's something you'd like me to talk about or a question you have, feel free. Okay? All righty. We'll catch you next week.